All right, well, good evening. Good evening, good evening. Hey, Chris Lukasevich, I am about 6 minutes behind schedule, having some technical issues, although I did have a really productive rehearsal earlier today, the best laid plans of mice and men. So this is Chris Lukasevich, Carbon County Commissioner. I'm broadcasting, live streaming from 2 Hazard Square, the Carbon County Administration Building, formerly known as the Annex. And I can hear myself now in my headset. I do want to mention that I will not be able to be visible during this live stream. It is unique in that when you screen share with Facebook, it does not allow you to also see it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So again, here we go. I have a little background noise taking place here. I'm going to try to go ahead and get onto my C4 page and feed to make sure I can see that post occurring right now, because I am not seeing the live feed occurring at this time. All right, so let me see if I can find it. And I do see that there are about 10 people right there online. Just bear with me, trying to make sure I have the feed so that I can see any comments that might come in. I'm kind of working handicapped tonight without the assistance of Maggie. All right, there we go. I'm good on that one. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Donna. Madeline. I see Madeline is on there also. Thank you so much for joining me again. This is Chris Lukasevich, and this is a overview of Carbon County government. And it's really a Government 101. So this is a wave top conversation. It is a screen share, so my face or profile will not be visible during this event. But nonetheless, I will be here, and it'll be primarily audio. If you have a question at any time, you have 2 options, as is always the case. You can go ahead and go to the chat room, or secondly, what you can do is go ahead and give me a call at, hi Deborah, at 570-503-6780. And as I start going through the slides, you will see on a regular basis, every other slide or so, you will see the phone number pop up if you want to give me a call in order to, if you have a question. All right, I'm starting to see the feeds on my big screen also. So let's get started. It is Thursday, 28 May. We're at about 8:10 or so in the evening, and this is county government, specifically focused on Carbon County government. And this is really what they call a primer, right? This is just a good wave top overview of Carbon County government. And again, it's from my perspective and my research and of course my own experience here in Carbon County government. So as I was mentioning, right there it is. Let me step back one slide, I'm sorry. All right, so here we go. On the bottom of that first slide, you'll see, go ahead, that's Commissioner Chris Lukasevich, and there's my phone number if you want to call in a question or a comment. Hi, Kim, thank you for tuning in. 570-503-6780. So who and what are we really talking about at the top level here tonight over about the next hour or so, right? We're talking about the Carbon County Commissioners. And one thing I want to emphasize, and I think it's really important to emphasize today. Hi, Donna. Thanks for tuning in. I think it's really important to emphasize a misperception. And that perception is that county commissioners run the county. But the fact is, we don't run the county, we run county government. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So again, commissioners don't run the county, right? We run county government. And that's what this is about. There are certain delegation of authorities in our system here in Pennsylvania. With the Commonwealth, the state has certain authorities, the county, and the municipalities have a significant number of authorities and responsibilities. And we're hoping to delineate them for you so you better understand how municipal government. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when they refer legally to municipalities, they're talking about the county and below. So a county in the Commonwealth is considered a municipality. But in day-to-day conversations, when we mention or I mention municipalities, I'm talking about the boroughs and townships. So what's the agenda that we're going to follow here? And I'm going to go ahead and discuss that. I'm going to give an overview of county government. And I'm going to look at, first and foremost, let me go to the next slide here. You'll see it. Here it is. So I'm going to look at the references, kind of the manuals and guides that I use for this discussion, give a general overview of Carbon County for those of you who might not be familiar with some of the general history, and talk about the classifications of the different counties. Then we'll look at the municipalities that make up Carbon County, and then look how Carbon County government is actually organized. And it's quite interesting, and it's kind of in three subsets, the way it is set up, with row officers, the courts, and finally the offices that fall under the county commissioners. Then I'll give you a little bit of overview of the current status where we are in number of employees, talk about the roles and responsibilities of the commissioners, their powers, be it legislative and the boards and authorities that we have. Look at a county government, what it specifically oversees, and then I'll talk about my interpretation of how county government should run. And then I'm going to talk about, and it's really not quite wrapping it up, but kind of in the seventh inning stretch, they're going to talk about home rule. And that's a specific type of administration of county government here in Pennsylvania. There's a conventional manner that we have with 3 commissioners, but then you have counties that are home rule counties. I'm a big proponent of home rule, and I'm going to try to give a little bit of education on home rule also. And then real quick, I'm just going to hit upon some major items on the horizon for the Carbon County commissioners. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are the references that I use? First and foremost, right up top, you're going to see, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's where we derive a lot of the authorities from. And those authorities really come down to the document right underneath it, which is referred to as and is the county code. And it describes duties and responsibilities of the officials that compose or make up the county. And that's boiled down into a nice document called the Manual for County Commissioners. And then, like I said, there's another document over here, is a good overview of all municipal government. That's on the right side of the slide, Citizen's Guide to Pennsylvania Local Government. That goes all the way down to the township level. And then jumping back over to the left side, there's that home rule in Pennsylvania. And this document was just updated here in March of 2020. So let's take a look now real quick at Carbon. Can I share? Appalling lack of knowledge throughout all PA. Of course, indeed it is. And this will be on Facebook. If you want to push it around, please feel free to do so. Again, I'm a great what they call jailhouse lawyer or a barracks lawyer. Again, I'm not saying I'm an expert at county government, but I've been studying it for almost 4 years now, and now having been actively involved, and every day has been an education. And that's what I want to share with each and every one of you. So let's kind of look at general overview of Carbon County. Thanks for joining us, Catherine. All right. So now let's jump all the way back to the white man coming into the area. And who was here first and foremost? The Lenape, right? And some people call it Lenape or Lenape, right? So the Native Americans were here, and they were actually the Lenape or Lenape were actually of the Delaware tribe. And here you had a small faction, the Mincy. And if you've read any of the history of Carbon County, you'll actually recognize that there wasn't really let's call it a permanent settlement of Native Americans in Carbon County. They actually, while they enjoyed the hunting and fishing and game opportunities here in Carbon County, it was more transitory in nature, something called the Warrior Path that ran up along the Lehigh. And the Indians tended to congregate more along the Schuylkill, the Allegheny rivers versus the Lehigh. I think many of us know, mostly if you're from up in Summit Hill with Ginter, right, you had the discovery of anthracite coal. And no surprise, Carbon County, carbon being coal, right? So in 1843, Carbon County actually came in existence. There it was carved out of or derived from Northampton, or what was then Northampton and Monroe County. It's about, by the Census Bureau numbers, they have us at about 400 square miles, with about 18 or 19 of that being water coverage, right, our lakes and dams and streams, and then the majority, about 382 square miles of land mass. Population actually has gone down just a slight bit if you look at the 2000 to the 2010 census. However, the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau, at last I saw, we were at like 65,182 or 3. Now, the decennial, the 10-year census is ongoing right now, so sometime next year we should have a more accurate count of where the population of Carbon County actually stands. I threw up the unemployment rate. Now, this was as of March. Again, that doesn't include April or into May. So it's about 2 months it lags from the Department of Labor and Industry. But again, you can see that Carbon County, as has been the historical trend, we're a bit behind and normally 1 or 2 points below the average when it comes to our employment figures. So at the end of March, we're really right at about 7.2%. The state of Pennsylvania at 5.8 unemployment. Now, with that said, bear in mind that this was just as the pandemic was starting to kick in. Look at Carbon County as it comes to average wages. Average wage just under $40,000 here in Carbon, and look at the PA average, about almost $10,000 more. And I picked out 3 significant areas because of the number of individuals employed in healthcare, legal, and management. And what I'm showing is the difference in healthcare between the county average and the state average is only about $50. So not a big difference. But now if you look at being in the legal profession, the difference is about $60,000. So a lawyer in Carbon County is earning significantly lower than the average salary for legal. Hi, Dee and Mark, welcome. This is County Government 101, and this is really a Chris Lukasiewicz Pennsylvania perspective, the Commonwealth perspective of counties. And then finally, there's management jobs, and this would be considered one, a county commissioner. And what's the delta or the difference in the average? Really about $11,000. So again, we know that Carbon County, relatively speaking, is a lower cost area, and therefore, we shouldn't be overly surprised by the difference in wage earning. We know we can go down to the Lehigh Valley in most professions and earn significantly more money. But again, you may be adding an hour and a half, 2 hour total commute. That's 2 hours of family and quality time. Now, in regards to counties in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they're classified by size. And you really have 8 classes. Carbon County, if you can look down at the 6th class, that's where Carbon County falls, right between 45,000 and 95,000 citizens. Have 22 other counties of 67 that fall into this sixth class category. Now, often you'll hear from the courts and others that we're a sixth class county with fourth class county challenges. And so we see two of the counties right in proximity, right, our neighbors, Monroe and Schuylkill, they are fourth class counties. And then you jump up to the third class counties, Lehigh, Luzerne, Northampton, and you see third class counties and much larger populations, all three of those plus the additional 9 from the 67, greater than 200,000, less than 500,000. And then if you go up to a first class over 1.5 million, that would be the Philadelphia area. And then finally Allegheny County out in southwestern Pennsylvania, which is Pittsburgh. So let's break that county of just under 400 square miles, a sixth class county, down a little bit to what I was referring to previously as the municipal level. All right, let me just go ahead and make sure my comments are scrolling here. Yep, indeed they are. All right, so 23 municipalities in Carbon County, and I would suspect that most citizens of Carbon County might be able to name about half, maybe get lucky in 3/4 of them. But again, we're broken down into boroughs and townships. So we have the 12 boroughs, right? And they're just a higher form. They have borough councils. And then you have the 11 townships, which have supervisors. Interesting about the 23 municipalities, you can actually, I want to say, you could break down somewhat the county a little bit differently. And not by municipalities, but maybe by regions. And so what I tend to refer to is up here in the north and northwest areas, that'll be Banks, Beaver, Luzerne, Weatherly, and Packer Township, and Lehigh. That'd kind of be the northern tier. And we know that's proximity really what? That's up there in the Hazleton area, that close connection to Hazleton. And east side, of course, over in here, really small borough, east side, really right across the Lehigh River from Whitehaven. And then you have, so that's that one section, that's that northern tier right here. Then you have, what we fondly refer to as out the mountain. And I think these two areas are both actually pretty unique. Kidder Township, Lake Harmony, Albrightsville out here. I find that it's more transitory, the seasonal homes, right? And then you have Penn Forest Township, which again has a bit more stability in the population. And then finally you really have the coal regions, right? Lansford, Summit Hill, Nesquehoning, and just up across, of course, the county line from Lansford is Coaldale. And we do, although it's outside our county, we do have students from Coaldale who go to Panther Valley. And interesting enough, if you're up here in Banks and Beaver Meadows, you're not going to a Carbon County school district. You're actually going to Hazleton school district there. So again, there's kind of that quid pro quo of we send some kids outside the school districts in Carbon, and then you'll see like Coaldale folks coming into Panther Valley. So this is kind of the coal cracker region, right? Nesquehoning, Lansford, Summit Hill. And then you have Jim Thorpe and Lehighton, right? If they're not, aren't they the kind of the metropolis area? And that's kind of the core of the county. And then you have these, not anomalies, but these, I guess, more vast rural areas, really farm centric, like Mahoning and East Penn. And I always try to think of who do they relate with? Do they relate to themselves as like Carbon County, or do they see themselves uniquely? And I think they do, because of the rural nature of those communities. They see themselves quite differently. And that brings me down to the Lower Towamensing, Bowmanstown, Palmerton area. And one could always make the argument that in lieu of Carbon County, they may associate more with Lehigh Valley. And, Lehigh County and Northampton County down in that area, just due to the proximity. Maybe Towamensing is a unique one, because you can head on out that way. Again, though, so you have these little different regions, and I think all of us are unique in these regions and how we see each other. And I think it's a friendly rivalry, but we do associate, again, Northern Tier with Hazleton, Palmerton down in the southeast, in that area with the Lehigh Valley, of course, the Coal Cracker region. So again, 23 municipalities, 12 boroughs, 11 township. My question would be, does anyone out there know where Audenried is? I pronounce it Audenried. It's probably incorrect. But you ever ask that question of someone who truly knows Carbon County? And of course, running for office, you learn those villages and small places that you never heard of before. But right up here in the far corner of Banks Township, there's, oh my gosh, it seems almost nothing of size-wise is Audenried. So Audenreid. Google it. Small place, and it actually is not what they consider a census location. So now I'm going to go ahead and start talking. I'm going to jump into this is the organizational chart for county government. And I put this together. There was a loose one put together when I got here, but I didn't think it at all well represented what county government or what the county structure looks like. So let's go ahead. And again, I mentioned there are three real elements of county government, right? And I'm going to talk about all three of them. They're the row offices or row officers you often hear. Then you have the judicial, and that's the courts. And then finally, this big, vast number of departments. So let's start with the row offices and talk about them a little bit. So these are the elected officials other than the county commissioners. They are considered co-equal elected officials to the commissioners. The commissioners don't actually control the row offices or row officers. Now, those from Carbon County who are listening recall the excuse or statements that were made when it was the problem with the former clerk of courts. And you would hear the Board of Commissioners and even the judiciary saying, well, there's really nothing we can do because they're an elected official. There's some truth to that, but nonetheless, let's talk about the statute, the law, and what it says. So these are the 9 elective county offices, right? And these are for counties that are not organized under home rule. Keep that in mind, because near the very end we're going to talk about home rule. Lori and Sandy, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Carbon County Government 101, really a primer, an overview of county government from my perspective. So statute or law does declare what these row officers will do, and with the understanding that the commissioners can't control them. However, the responsibility and the way commissioners can influence these different offices, and I'll detail some of their functions of each of them. We actually, as commissioners, we control the budget, the personnel administration system, the physical plant, the buildings. And we're actually, as commissioners, we control budget, contracting, personnel, right? The infrastructure. So you do have a leverage or a lever which you can use to, let's say, influence compliance, maybe with county-wide policies. So first and foremost, county treasurer, right? That's really receipt and custody and disbursement of all county monies. Here, Ronnie Sheehan is our, I'm going to go ahead and hide right there. The treasurer is Ronnie Sheehan here in Carbon County. And so any payments that come in or revenue that comes in actually first and foremost goes into his office, and he actually takes that revenue that comes in and provides that to JTNB or Mock Chunk Trust. It's Jim Thorpe National Bank or Mock Chunk Trust. Now, at the same time, though, keep in mind, the treasurer here in Carbon County has other roles, right? He does licensing for games of chance, dog licensing, hunting license, those types of things. But again, primarily the custody and disbursement of all county monies. All right. So let's jump up to the district attorney, right? So he is responsible for signs all bills of indictment and conducts, all in the criminal court prosecution, right? And he's working on behalf of the Commonwealth here in Carbon County. Again, though, another elected official. Jump down to the sheriff, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but the way I have my note page set up here. So Tony Harvilla is the county sheriff. And bear in mind, the county sheriff is an officer of the court. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ruled that sheriffs are not law enforcement officials, right? So they do not have the explicit right to perform law enforcement duties. So bear that in mind when you see a sheriff's vehicle out on the road. They're not sitting there looking to give people tickets. More than likely, they're going out to issue or to service a bench warrant, so a judge who's ordered some individual who didn't show up to court to come in, or they're serving some type of court document. So again, very limited in their authority. Now, if you go out west or to many other states, sheriffs are law enforcement entities. And again, I think it's a great concept. There is one or two bills that have been sitting in the House or the Senate trying to give them more authority and closer proximity to law enforcement agencies, but they really never made any progress. Next, let's look at the prothonotary office, right? And I think most of us probably, unless you have to deal with the prothonotary, it's now Kayla Semmel, had been Joanne Behrens for many years, probably couldn't even pronounce the word. But this is the clerk of court of common pleas, right? And that office is keeping the records of all civil procedures before the courts. Signs all the writs and processes, and files copies of records and processes. And, a day-to-day activity, if you need something notarized, boom, good place to go. You need a passport issued, or at least to do your application, the prothonotary's office. So that's the court of common pleas. Well, now, if you go to the clerk of courts, there is the clerk of courts, they're criminal focused. So the chief clerk and record keeper for the criminal court. So again, you had that distinction between the clerk of courts, who works the criminal, and then the prothonotary, who works the civil side. The register of wills, jump right down to that. That's the register of wills right there. They have primarily jurisdiction over the probate of wills. So if a will is, they'll go ahead and file it. If someone does pass away, they'll go ahead and work the legal aspects of that will to include collection of the death tax. And the death tax does bring in quite a bit of revenue to Carbon County. All right. She also serves in Carbon County, dual hat at the Register of Wills, is also the clerk of orphan courts. So handles all proceedings relatives to the estates of incompetence and to adoption. So incompetence, you have a special need daughter who is potentially under a legal guardianship as decreed by the court. That office handles that and tracks the guardian tracking that is required. So we have a special needs daughter, Molly. When she became an adult, we had to go to court to become her legal guardians and become responsible for her as a person, so her health and welfare, and her estate, that welfare part. So clerk of orphan courts for that. And then finally, you have the recorder of deeds, and they're right below me in this building, 2 floors down. And it's really all about the preservation of records relating to real estate or real property. So what are we looking at? We're looking at deeds. So again, chosen by the voters, right? The commissioners, you don't see a direct line over from the commissioners to the row officers. All right, now let's look at the judicial. So that's our 3 judges, President Judge Nanovic, Judge Matika, and Judge Serafos. And then you have the Court of Common Pleas and the court administration. So you have your district justices, right? You go here in Jim Thorpe, up in Weatherly, in Palmerton, in Lansford, are what we primarily refer to around here as our magistrates. You also have domestic relations, right? And that's a lot about really those protections from abuse, dealing with those types of incidents. Then you have the probation offices, those individuals, be those adults or children, who are on probation. The probation officers broken down into 2 clusters, one to cover adults and one for the juvenile population. And finally, the law library falls under that. Connected loosely and a quasi is the public defender. So those are the individuals who, when an attorney is appointed, right, you have your Miranda rights. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed towards you. There's your public defenders. And that's Greg Mousseau leads that office with a handful of lawyers and other support staff there. You will see there is a dotted line running from the commissioners down to the prison. Now, the commissioners by themselves do not run the prison. Rather, the commissioners sit on the prison board. They are 3 members of a commission that is responsible for oversight of the Carbon County Correctional Facility. So you have these 2 bodies, right? The judicial, and then finally the row officers that don't directly fall under the commissioners. So here you have the commissioners, and the commissioners, 3 of them elected for a 4-year term, right? Directly, we have a solicitor, we have a chief clerk, and that would be like the primary administrator for county government. And in the military sense, that would be like your executive officer who runs day-to-day operations, really kind of keep things going, synchronizes, coordinates all the actions of the departments. Now, the departments I'm going to discuss, I'm not going to go into great detail on them, but I'll kind of highlight some of them. These departments work directly under of the commissioners. And you're going to see a little bit later, we do have 4 unions that are represented, or units that are represented in this group of almost 400 individuals that make up the entirety of county government. So information technology and archives. Information technology, right? That's the technology infrastructure, the systems, the computers I'm using right now. Then you have archives. Archives, again, we are trying to go paperless, and we do have a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to maintain certain records in hard copy for a particular amount of time before they can be digitized. That's over in 4th Street in Jim Thorpe, right there down the street from Tommy's. Right now, this next group, falling under the commissioners, the Area Agency on Aging. The Area Agency on Aging deals with all matters of our senior citizens, to include the senior centers that we have in Carbon County, Nesquehoning, Weatherly, Palmerton, Lehighton. Then there's the Jim Thorpe or the Penn Kidder up on top of 903. They also are responsible for coordination and synchronization with Carbon County Community Transit. So that's that bus transportation system in Carbon County that serves not only our seniors but those with medically challenged individuals. Although the public can use it, the fortunate thing is for senior citizens, they tend to be subsidized by the Area Agency on Aging, so their rates and fares are notably lower. You have children and youth, and it is Children and Youth Officials Week this forthcoming first week in June. So they are responsible, might be called child welfare, ensuring the well-being of children and their placement, if necessary, in guardianships, in foster homes, or where need be to ensure their safety and well-being. Human resources, again, personnel matters, hiring, evaluations. And then we have a Director of Veterans Affairs, Christine LeClaire, who deals all with veterans issues, to include something as such as getting all the flags out to the cemeteries for Veterans Day, helping veterans process claims for benefits or entitlements they may have earned. There is a gratuity that goes out, a widow's benefit, widower's benefit that goes out to our veterans when they pass away. And they're also responsible for keeping the record of a death of every veterans. And if you go over to the archives building, there's actually, it used to be a penciled in or penned in book that lists every veteran who dies and where he's buried at. All right. Then the tax assessment office. So, right, your house is valued at or assessed at $200,000, right? They cut that in half at $100,000, right? These are the folks who go out and do inspections or assess homes and provide a value for that home so that the applicable taxation can be applied. And as we know, the school districts provide the majority of the tax burden on the citizens of Carbon County. It doesn't mean to understate the burden that the county puts on us. As we all know, last year the outcoming board and 2 of the 3 members of the incoming board, placed a 19.5% burden on us taxpayers. And we're up to 12.25 mil right now for that. So that's tax assessment. So what happens if you don't pay your taxes by the end of the year? Well, then it goes to tax claim. And the tax claim office is responsible for sending out those notices and, if necessary, take those actions to place a lien on a home should the taxes not be paid. A great, very productive office is our GIS, right? This is geospatial. This is all about mapping. So if an individual wants to look at a parcel of land, you can go on to the Carbon County GIS website, click on that website. That'll give you a record of that property, giving you the information of who owns it, its size, its general characteristics. And it's a great tool, the GIS mapping tool. And I would say, you want to know where you'll be voting on 2 June? Jason, the director down there, Director Jason Shellhammer, has created an application, an app, to help you find your polling location. If you have any interest in COVID-19, he has a suite of applications that he has brought together to help keep us informed. It's just a great tool, and it's deeply tied into emergency management 911. Our emergency management director, Mark Nalesnik, helps synchronize and coordinate our efforts with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. Great example here in COVID-19, the director or coordinator of emergency management, had the lead for bringing additional PPE, personal protection equipment, here into Carbon County. That's up on the Broad Mountain, co-located with our 911 communications center. So when fire, police, ambulance, needs to be dispatched. That's coming off the Broad Mountain right up there, and they're just down the street, literally, from the prison. Coming up, speaking of elections, our elections office, Lisa Dart, responsible for the running of elections twice a year. Here, we have the primary coming up on 2 June, followed by November, our general election. Now, this is called the general primary, and then you have the general election, which will be in November. Just over about, I think, 6,700 requests for mail-in, absentees, and military ballots. Significant increase. If I recall, it was maybe in 2016, did Lisa say today, they had about 600 requests, and now we're up to about 6,700 mail-ins. Again, that's because of Act 77, the change in the law, which has allowed mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. I think it's exacerbated by also the fact of the pandemic and people not necessarily feeling comfortable to be out there at the polling locations. Also falling under the commission of purchasing. So any equipment or contracts that need to be let or signed or created works through our purchasing department. We, of course, have a buildings and grounds and planning and development. And planning development, they might be working the hazardous waste plan the waste management plan, synchronizing, coordinating that. The CDBG grants, community development block grants, the planning and development works that. And he's also oversees the zoning and hearing the zoning board. And finally, kind of not anomalies, but 3 are out there. The animal shelter, if I recall correctly, we're the only county in the state that runs an animal shelter. Do a great job up there, quite well supported by local residents through donations. I do have a concern, the fact that donations are actually needed. The preponderance of the food, from what I've seen, actually comes from donations. Again, if county government is going to run a service, I would always argue the fact is county government is, if they are actually running a service, it should be an essential service to the community, and therefore it must be fully funded. And that's one particular office I don't think we fully fund. And again, if it's deemed essential, fully fund it. Then again, right, the parking meters in the county lot, that's run by our parking office, about 10 individuals in that office, only one full-timer and the rest are part-time. They tend to flow in based upon the activities taking place in Carbon County. Now, we will be starting to install here shortly the kiosk system, so it'll be interesting to see how the kiosk system and no longer having meters or no necessity to have the booth manned, how that might impact personnel when it comes to parking. And then finally, Mock Chunk Lake Park. And unfortunately, or the fact is, many individuals, mostly if you're not from the area, have this misperception that Mock Chunk Lake Park is a state park. Indeed, it is not. It is a county park. Right, it was in 1969. Things got going there. 1978 was the National Watershed of the Year. A great recreational facility, swimming, hiking, canoeing, fishing, right there on the Lentz Trail. So Mock Chunk Lake Park. And the big effort going on today is, I think many residents of Carbon County are aware, at least those who watch Blue Ridge or subscribe to the Times News, is looking at the possibility, as at least as long as we're in the yellow phase, to keep the camping and swimming parts activities of Mock Chunk Lake Park restricted to Carbon County residents only. And that case has been made. Again, we see a significant influx of individual from, let's call them red counties or red states, and I'm talking red COVID-19 red, that is hindering our ability as county residents who who have historically paid for Mock Chunk Lake Park, its maintenance, its running, is prohibiting our regular use of it. And physical and mental well-being is so important at this time. I hold the position that we need this safe space where our county residents can go and enjoy the outdoors. A few other offices that are associated with Carbon County government, but not necessarily under the control or fully financed by county government. Workforce Development Area and WIOA, that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which provides a funding for a multi-county initiatives that take place to ensure that manufacturers or businesses have properly trained individuals for the jobs that we have today and the jobs into the future. Right, then you have the Penn State Extension, right, the Agricultural Service right there at the breast of the dam. Actually, one county employee does work out there, that Penn State Extension office. So if you have a problem with a plant, you can't recognize it, it has a blight or something, Penn State Extension, they can help you identify it. They work with the Conservation District, big responsibility of running and facilitating the 4-H programs throughout the state, to include in Carbon County. Economic development actually falls no longer under the county. That has really been pushed out to Carbon Chamber Economic Development Corporation, LLC. The county provides funding and one individual to CCEDC, again, to work in the promotion and the development of economic livelihoods here in Carbon County. And then finally, you have the Housing Authority. You hear us normally, we'll refer to them as the mid-rises or the high-rises, such as the mid-rise down in Palmerton, the Palmer House, go up to a mid-rise in Lansford, the old Nesquehoning School. Those fall under Carbon County Housing Authority. It's actually a federal program through Housing and Urban Development. The role of the commissioners in the Housing Authority is simply to appoint the board that oversees that. So again, that is broad brushstroke Carbon County government. That's the organizational structure as I see it here. And this is really more or less about 396. Let me get out of my laser pointer here, see if I can do that. Okay, move to my next slide. All right, so county employees. 396, full-time 294, part-time 102, and as part of that part-time, you do have, for example, I talked about the parking attendants, or those who help facilitate the parking on the weekends or high tourist times here. That seasonal park rangers, lifeguards, individuals like that make up the part-time staff. But you do have part-time corrections officers, part-time communicators up at the 911 center, so dispatchers. Of those 396, 123 union members. And there's 3 unions, 2 AFSCME, and then a Sheriff's Association. Plus, and why I mentioned 4 earlier, because we have a quasi or pseudo a union. It's really a prison sergeant's memorandum of agreement that gives them certain protections not dissimilar to the Teamsters member, the Teamster corrections officers. So out of that 123, right, you have Teamsters, which make up 54, and that's the Carbon County Correctional Facility, CCCF. Falling under AFSCME, you have 55 general, and then that fall under the court, you have 21. And finally, in the Sheriff's Association, or sheriffs, deputy sheriffs, you have 14. So that's the makeup. So let's go ahead and look at the office of county commissioner specifically. All right. So as again, I initially mentioned, what guides the authorities, the responsibilities of what the county commissioners can or cannot do, that is the county code. And the county code, 4-year term qualifications, other than being a registered voter, there's not much in the way of what the qualifications are for that office. The county code really only is about 3 or 4 pages, and it's quite vanilla, not very specific. There are some specific tasks, but then there are some implied tasks also. It is indeed, the Board of Commissioners is the chief governing body of the county government, right? Chief governing body of the county government, and not of the county. So I probably need to add that onto my slide there, put county government, just to clarify that. The county commissioners run county government. We don't run the county. We can't tell businesses to open, close. We can't tell you to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Again, that's not within our authority, right? So, we do have a responsibility for selective policy-making authority, right, to provide certain services and facilities on a county-wide basis. And I talked about some of those, the Agency on Aging, Children and Youth Services, right? But we primarily have administrative powers and duties that include, the departments that I highlighted, appointment of personnel, and that's again for those offices that we control and others, and fiscal management. And I talked about that appointment of county personnel and fiscal management because there are a certain number of boards that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes that tie into that. And if you recall, I talked about the leverage. How can we persuade or influence row offices or the judicial side of the county, quote unquote, to adhere to county-wide policies. And I think that'll describe a little bit better once we talk about some of the boards that we sit on and how we can shape actions or influence actions by, for example, our co-equal row officers. So what are the legislative powers, right? The motion is, I think most of us know, Robert's, right? It's a parliamentary tool, making motions. And when we can do regulations, administrative though. So a regulation is administrative. And that's just about how does, I refer to it as a policy, but it's a regulation according to county code, right? How do we conduct day-to-day business? What's our personnel policy? What's our drug testing policy, etc., and all those things. And of course we do resolutions, and that's official policy or statement. It's not an ordinance, right? It's not a law enforcement agency is going out or a zoning officer is going out to ensure compliance. We tend to see here in county government resolutions, proclamations, not a lot of bite to those particular documents. I'm trying to think of, since I've come on board, I have not seen any particular ordinance produced by Carbon County government. Again, the municipalities, boroughs and townships are very empowered in Pennsylvania. So you'll see the ordinance is really coming out of zoning, health, sanitation, things of that nature. So again, this is Chris Lukasevich. We're winding down here. This is Carbon County Government 101, just a wave top overview. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and just drop them in there. I want to thank Mary, Open Our State, Mary Oriani. We're almost there, Mary. I think within about 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have the whole state open to a point, whatever green really looks like. I see Justin's there, Catherine and Tom. Glad Tom came in off the front porch there. See him all the time when I drive by, mostly when I head home for lunch and in the evening, to include coming over here. So thanks for tuning in a little bit. So that was the legislative power. So what are the boards and authorities that the commissioners sit on? So the internal ones, and are those associated directly with, really Two Hazard Square down here, right? There's the Board of Commissioners, which, myself, Rocky, and Wayne compose or are. Then you have a salary board, and on a monthly basis, the salary board, which includes the 3 commissioners, the controller, plus a a row officer who may be recommending a salary increase for an employee, will become momentarily a member of the salary board, simply for the vote when they make the motion to change a position, increase a salary board. So you have the salary board, which meets again to adjust salaries formally once a year, do a complete review of the salaries, and then every month adjustments are made as people come and go, annual increases and things of that nature. Then you have the retirement board. The retirement board is responsible for management of the funds that make up the county retirement fund. That's somewhat redundant there, isn't it? The funds that make up the fund. But again, it's all about retirement, checking and providing oversight through a third party, really, of how funds are invested to ensure we meet our responsibilities to have a strong financial plan and resources to support our retirees. There's also the Railroad Commission. I think many folks may not know that Carbon County does own a railroad, more or less 20 miles of railroad tracks that runs from right here, just down the street here from the courthouse annex, or administration building, actually all the way up into Hometown. That runs there. Now that railroad that we own has been contracted out to Reading and Northern Blue Mountain Railroad, and that is somewhat, let me say that the county receives some revenue from that agreement, but nothing substantial. I think Amtrak is a perfect example why governments shouldn't run railroads, and I would say this is another place where governments should not run railroads, and that's in Carbon County. I'm the one, sell it, sell it, sell it now. All right, because I believe we can gain more from allowing private business to invest in it and take full advantage of the opportunities it might present. Election board coming up. The 3 commissioners with the director of elections make up the election board. However, if a commissioner would happen to be up, or the commissioners are up for a re-election and are running for office, they have temporary replacements who come in to avoid that potential conflict of interest. I also go down to the other planning and zoning. Right, we have a planning and zoning. They don't approve planning and zoning. What happens, the municipality sends their plans up to the county for review, and the county simply makes a recommendation in regards to planning and zoning. So it's really a check, an additional check for the municipalities. And the municipalities can accept or not accept the recommendations that are made by the planning and zoning board. We do have a Parks and Recreation board. There's 5 appointed citizens to that board, and they are an advisory board, and they really are focused on Mock Chunk Lake Park. And then you have farmland preservation. There's a farmland preservation program in Pennsylvania, and that's where the state provides money, county provides matching funds to really get farmland into a situation that it won't be developed. So you're basically buying the rights to suspend any development of farmland. A great program, definitely not enough money in it to bring and preserve as many farms as are on the waiting list for that particular program. So the external boards, we work a lot. Carbon, Monroe, Pike, CMP, MHDS is mental health, disability services. The Joiner board are really all the commissioners from Carbon, Monroe, and Pike who are responsible for the oversight of providing those mental health disability services through the 3 counties. We also do have an advisory board. That is the advisory board to the Jointer board, and that includes 1 commissioner from each 3 of the counties, plus select individuals from Carbon, Monroe, and Pike. Have the Shepherd House food pantry on which 1 commissioner sits. The Conservation District, that meeting's tonight. We have 1 commissioner sits on that. Then you have the LEPC. Let me, I'm real thick. Emergency planning, local emergency planning, right? Have 1 commissioner sits on that. And then finally, the Council of Governments, or the COG. That is an entity of municipal governments, plus 1 commissioner sits on that. About 17 or 18 members of the 23 boroughs and townships make up the Council of Government. So, there's county. So county government, and we talked about this, so I'm just going to review, right? We do assessments on property, manage corrections, right? We provide the infrastructure and the support to the courts, run elections, do emergency services such as the 911 communications, disaster planning and assistance, human services, planning and GIS, so mapping, transportation, plus things like agriculture, that's that land preservation, environmental issues, that comes out of our planning office. That delinquent real estate, I talked a little bit about that tax claim. Remember, we kind of push out economic development, the Carbon Chamber Economic Development Corporation. We have a contract with them to provide services. And then property and civil records management, we talked about that. So how does Chris Lukasiewicz see county government, or how it should actually work? So let's go ahead and look at that. County government to me is really the 3 pieces to it are the commissioners, the row offices, or department heads, and the staff. Now we're talking about that which falls under and works with county government. There's 3 levels: strategic, the operational, and the tactical. That strategic level is really about the planning, the synchronization, the coordination of the overall effort of county government and the county as a government to provide services to its citizens. That's the strategic level. That's where the commissioners need to be. And who carries out that? Well, 2 groups: the row offices, row officers, and the department heads are at the operational level, right? They're ensuring that this vision, this strategy that's carried out, like the Carbon County Comprehensive Plan might be that strategy. Who ensures it's being carried out? That's the row officers and the department heads. And who's doing the grunt work, right? Who's down in the trenches? That's those staff members or caseworkers who are really doing the day-to-day grind. And that's kind of the tactical level. So you have these 3 levels, and this is how it should work. And it shouldn't always be, it shouldn't be commissioners down here doing tactical work, nor should staff or caseworkers necessarily be doing strategic level of work. It doesn't mean the 2 don't intermix from time to time or they're not connected. They absolutely are, because what happens at the tactical level can go ahead and buffer up to the operational and strategic level, and vice versa. But again, I like to delineate roles and responsibilities, or at least in a general sense, and this is how I let it play out. So in regards to what is the conventional organization of counties and the leadership at the strategic level, it's that 3-member board of commissioners. But what I want to talk around now, we have about 20 minutes left here, and I think about 4 or 5 slides. I want to talk about home rule. And it says home rule and optional plan of government, but I'm going to focus on home rule because this is a passion of mine, because I do believe government can be more effective and more efficient. So what is home rule? It's unlike having 3 board members. Home rule is like a company, right? A publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange, for example, right? You would have a CEO, right? A chief executive officer or chief operating officer, plus a board of directors, right? And that board of directors really is providing the guidance to the CEO, COO, and the check and balance to move them forward. And you actually would have one individual, which is unique in home rule. You'd actually only have one executive who is or could be elected. So instead of 3 commissioners, you might be electing one executive manager who is a full-time employee, and then you have these part-time commissioners who are actually advisors to the CEO, COO, and provide that oversight. And what home rule does, it shifts the responsibility of local government from the state legislator to the local community. And what it gives home rule counties the authority to do is exercise that power and function that is not denied by the Constitution, Home Rule Charter of the General Assembly. So, for example, I'm trying to think, as long as the Constitution doesn't forbid a home rule county doing it, the county can do it. Now, in our current form of government, the commissioners can only do what the state tells us we can do. And you'll see this in about 2 bullets down. So who has home rule? Well, actually 7 counties, and 2 of them who are our neighbors. Northampton and Luzerne are 2 of those. And then, Philadelphia, plus 4 others right now. So we have cases right here in our neighborhood of counties that have adopted home rule. And it's kind of a limited independence. So without home rule, that's Carbon County, right? Here this is, right? We can only act where specifically authorized by the state, right? But with home rule, we can act anywhere except where specifically limited by state law. Lisa, thanks for tuning in. We miss you, and Donna, haven't seen you guys in a long time. All right, so by electing home rule or doing a referendum that allows home rule, you're replacing that 3-member board, right? You have a larger board, and with a larger board, an elected executive. And so why might we want to do home rule? Well, 3 commissioners. Right now we have 2 from Lehighton, 1 from Jim Thorpe, right? So you can say, one could make an argument there's a bias because we don't necessarily reflect the opinions or the positions of the entire county because, we come from Lehighton, we come from Jim Thorpe. Well, with a home rule, you could actually elect 7, 9, or 11, quote-unquote, part-time commissioners, so it would be more diverse and better represent the electorate than it does now. Also, you could replace the row office structure with an admin structure. So instead of having the prothonotary, the clerk of courts, the controller, the treasurer, instead of them potentially changing every 4 years through elections, they can simply be hired employees. So you're getting technocrats, bureaucrats, individuals who are selected for their knowledge in the field and not simply because they're the most popular guy or girl in town. So, how does this process work, home rule? Well, home rule process, right? It's about an electoral process going to, I see one of the slides, that implementation got messed up there. All right, I see that one. Hold on, let me stop back here. We're almost there. All right, so here we are. So home rule process. This is the question that you're asking the electorate. Shall a government study commission of 7911 be elected to study the existing form of government to consider the advisability of adoption of a home rule charter? Right? So this is what we're trying to get at with this process, home rule. That's the first question. So how do you get a question like this on the ballot? Well, it can either be done by an ordinance. So remember, we go back about 10 slides, county commissioners can create ordinances. So there could be a motion. I move that Carbon County shall consider the home rule. If that motion passes, well, the process can start. Now, if that Board of Commissioners are reluctant and don't want home rule to at least be considered, private citizens can do it through petition. So all you have to do, quote unquote, is get petitions signed of equal to or greater than 5% of the last general governor election. So you take 10,000 people voted, and actually it's probably about 16, 17,000, maybe up to 20, voted in the last election for governor. Take 5% of that, you get that petition signed by that many individuals, then you can go ahead and get the question on the ballot. And the question on the ballot is to really set up a commission to study home rule and then actually to elect the commission members. So if you get the ordinance or the petition done, then it goes to a vote. And what you're asking are two questions. Shall a government study commission of 7, 9, or 11 members be elected to look at the current form of government and consider going to a home rule charter? And then, if advisable, to go ahead and actually draft that home rule charter. That home rule charter is like the county having a constitution. And Lehigh, Northampton, as two that I mentioned, our neighbors, do indeed have that form of government. So, one, you're going to go ahead and vote for setting up the commission, and at the same time you're going to vote for commission members. So you decide if it's 7, 9, or 11, and then that's what you're voting for. And they do nomination papers, petitions, right? Just like you do running for any office. You get those petitions signed, and look, it's not many, right? Lesser or greater than 2% of the last governor's race, or 200, whichever is less. So really, you need about 200 signatures here in Carbon County. You circulate those petitions, get them in 3 weeks' time, and boom, you can run as a commission member. Now, if we vote to form this commission, it'll move forward to this 18-month period. However, if it's voted no, it dies right here and never goes to the study phase. Interesting, regardless of how you vote on the question to establish, you vote yes or no, you're still expected to vote for commission members. So you may say, no, I don't want this commission, but the expectation is you still vote for commission members in case it does pass. All right? So let's say in this instance, shall a government study commission be elected? Yes. And we go ahead and vote for members. And so what they do is they have an 18-month period, this government study commission. 10 days after the election, they're taking their oath. Within 15 days after the election, they're having their first meeting. And what are they doing? They're studying the existing form of government. It's like going through County Government 101, right? Then once they go through County Government 101, right, they study the existing structure. Now they're going to start breaking it down and looking at its strengths and weaknesses, comparing it to other counties or other
forms of government. And they're looking at, could a home rule be more responsible, more responsive to the citizens, more transparent? Is it economical, maybe more efficient? And if so, they'll also work the process of drafting the charter, right? So drafting the charter, drafting that new constitution for the county. And I want to mention, I put financial down here. And this financial is really about, where do the funds come for this? Well, if this referendum passes here, the county is responsible for providing the funding to support what could and should be an 18-month process. For Carbon County, based upon historical numbers, it probably costs about $25,000 to run this study group. And that's some legal fees, printing, publications, things like that. But again, these members are non-paid commission members. So over 18-month period, right, they're studying, deliberating, drafting a charter. And ultimately, what they're doing is coming to the point within 18 months of putting up to vote a referendum. Shall the home rule charter contained in the report, so from this government commission, prepared in accordance with the home rule charter, be adopted by Carbon County? So again, then you'd go ahead, the citizens of Carbon County vote on it. Yes, we prefer to go to home rule. We prefer to be in charge of our own destiny. Anything the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania says, anything other than denied by the Constitution, we're able to execute and do. Then you go into that implementation phase. So it's interesting to read the Lehigh and Northampton home rule charters, their constitutions, to see how they're laid out. Like I said, I like this because I like the CEO, board of directors type relationship. I like the fact that you could have up to 11 commissioners. Again, these are part-time, so you're going to save money. You're not hiring 3 commissioners at, I don't know, whatever they pay us, right, plus fringe benefits, fringes and stuff like that. So you have these 7, 9, or 11 advisors or board that influence and shape this chief executive officer. So that is home rule. And I would advise, DCED is the one who produced the documents that I reference on home rule. Read that, because again, I think my next passion after this short political stint is going to be trying to push home rule consideration here in Carbon County. All right, so finally I just want to hit on, as I finish up here in the next 7 minutes, on major items on the horizon for Carbon County. And again, this isn't Carbon Matters live streaming, but I do want to make you aware of some of the decisions that will be made in the future. And this is to bring this all together to show maybe some of the duties and responsibilities and decisions that commissioners ultimately have to make. So, the most recent one is probably, Mock Chunk Lake Park, restricting it to county residents only and working through that problem solving. What are the challenges? How do we ensure, hold on, let me grab something here. So how do we ensure the safety as we work through that process? Because you're going to have traffic backing up. We're short on lifeguards, so how does that impact the swim area? Swim at your own risk. Employees, traffic is backed up and all these folks from New York, New Jersey, or outside Carbon County coming in. Does that increase exposure? So, at Mock Chunk Lake Park, we're looking at safety. We're looking financial. How do you verify non-residents and residents? What is really the capacity of Mock Chunk Lake Park in the beach and swim area, camping sites during COVID-19 pandemic, yellow or green? And how do we get that message out there? So there's a lot in that first bullet alone. So renovation projects, there was a Susquehanna Street project that had its final nail in the coffin just about a year ago, when the commissioners, that board, astutely, based upon political issues, decided to drop that and give it to the next board. But again, we still are short on space, so commissioners need to look at the potential of renovating 76 Susquehanna, maybe 44 Susquehanna, which is the old archives building and maintenance building. And finally, the courthouse. We have a courthouse dating back to the 1800s. So, things like the infrastructure, the physical plant, it's just not laid out for a 21st century courthouse. So a lot of renovation. That's that, $24 million in long-term debt that the last board accumulated for Carbon County, and that's where that money is, and we'll be paying for 30 years of part of our debt service. So the Emergency Operation Training Center, that's continuing to move forward. We're really at the stage of probably not far from concrete going in up there, and that should hopefully next year that should finish up. Definitely chop that down from the Taj Mahal that was planned by the last board. I was really anti the Taj Mahal, and I think we got it probably where it needs to be. It's the right size, right fit for what our volunteer firefighters and others need for a training center locally. Prison infrastructure, it's horrendous. Our prison is in bad shape. Going to see a significant water project taking place up there, plus other long-term maintenance that has really been neglected over the last couple decades. Packard and Yard, Carbon County still owns that. Get rid of it. Sell it, or as I always said, have the county work in a cooperative to go ahead and turn it into a solar farm, or sell it off. County Railroad, sell it off, But again, the county does need to decide what we're going to do with that railroad. Are we going to hold it on and not make any money anyhow? Or are we going to privatize it, so sell it off and let someone else invest in that infrastructure? We are getting ready to install parking kiosks. So the meters should be gone between, I would say, now and fall foliage if the festival takes place. But by October, they should all be in place, and hopefully that'll run smoothly. Maybe a little bit of lessons learned from when Jim Thorpe put theirs in. At the same time, there's going to be a connector trail from the new pedestrian bridge, and that's going to run up to where the county storage building is now. And that's coming through the parking lot to make a safe passage there. Essential services, I always hit on that. We always have to be reviewing what Carbon County government does, and is it an essential service? If it is not an essential service, don't do it. If it's an essential service, fully fund it. And I always use the animal shelter as the question mark there. Is it an essential service? If yes, indeed it is, because it's part of county government, then fully fund it. I think importantly too, COVID-19 after action report, getting those lessons learned. Hold on. Oh, Jennifer, are there any potential negative impacts as far as receiving state or for the county if home rule were instituted? Actually, Jennifer, no, there are none. And there might be simply because we'd still be able to apply to all the same grants and loans and would have to adhere to those same guidelines, but a home rule county cannot be discriminated upon for those. So there's aren't grants and loans out there at the federal and state level that exempt home rule counties by name. Right? So no. So essential. Let's see. So the COVID after action report. We really need that. Put that together, and I'm going to take the lead on that, talk to every department, every row officer, and over in the courts, what did we do well, what did we not do well, what's an issue, what's a recommendation to fix it, and how can we be better prepared, and how can we run a more effective and more efficient county government based upon the pandemic experience. You're welcome. And that's just from Jennifer's note. So we have G5. Also, and I've heard some concerns about G5. I will tell you, I'm a big supporter of G5, right? I want less latency. I want faster speeds. I want smart cars. And smart cars are going to require things like G5. But again, I'm open to have that conversation to become better educated on both the pros and the cons. What I'm primarily hearing are health concerns associated with it. And I know there are some technical challenges with it because of the wavelength and things like that, and how it can't penetrate foliage and buildings and stuff like that. And that's why we need so many antennas all over the place. But I do believe it's critical. And I think we learned that from this pandemic. If we're going to have telemedicine, distant education, like the students are doing now, where they're basically homeschooling, quote unquote, if we're going to use that technology and we're going to be committed to it, well, then we need to have the infrastructure to support it. And G5, with those higher speeds at less latency and stuff, is critical to that. And then Carbon County Community Transit. A rural community, we are challenged by the 400 square miles of land and water that we have, and our seniors are challenged, our citizens are challenged to get around the county. And so we need to always be assessing CCCT and figure out where we're going to go from there. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it up here. So I'm going to hang out for a couple more minutes. I'm about 1 minute over, so I apologize for that. 570-503-6780. If you want to give me a call now or sometime in the future, please don't hesitate to do so. That's 570-503-6780. That number's right on should be pinned to the top of my Facebook page, C4 Chris, Carbon County Commissioner. And this has been County Government 101. It has been Carbon County specific. I tell you, this is only the second time I've done anything like this type of presentation on county government. I'm passionate about county government, passionate about I think learning more about it, understanding it, how to leverage it to raise the quality of life for all citizens of Carbon County. I would encourage all of you to become better informed, better educated, know the roles and responsibilities of county government. And I want to go back to one of those first slides real quick because to me it is critical. I think everyone should understand that first point should be the last point. County commissioners don't run the county. Commissioners run county government. As I highlighted, specifically those departments that fall under us. And then we have that supporting function for the row officers and the court. So real quickly, that's me, Wayne, Rocky. This is our solicitor, Dan, Ellie, right, the executive officer or chief clerk, and then Colleen, who's the assistant chief clerk. And this is here in the Carbon County Conference Room. So again, thanks everyone who has spent a little bit of time with me here tonight. I'm going to leave this up on Facebook. I will be redoing it in the near future and kind of do a more polished version as I continue to work through it and better understand and gain more, practical experience in county government. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Please, if you haven't done a mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, or military overseas or elsewhere absentee ballot, please ensure you get to the polls on 2 June and vote. Prepare for the November election. There are some delegates to conventions and things like that. Not really any contested races of note, but please indeed keep that great voting record that I suspect most of you who are tuning in have. And again, good night. I'm going to shut it down here, and thanks again for tuning in. This is Chris Lukasevich, Carbon County Commissioner, just finishing up County Government 101 primer. Take care. Wonderful.